337 of Global from Asia podcast, relationships and business deals between Australia and China, and some lessons learned. It's some interesting stuff today. Let's tune in.
Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast, where the daunting process of running an international business is broken down into straight up actionable advice. And now, your host, Michael Michelini.
Thank you, everybody, for choosing to download and listen to or stream or watch or whatever. It's all over the place here. We're on all the channels we can be on in China and overseas. Hopefully the show stays online in China. We are talking about some relationships of business, of governments. Honestly, there are huge groups that, I am not too much involved with, but I thought it might be a good discussion to have today because it's hard to almost avoid. And what we need to learn as business owners, as cross-border traders, is we are somewhat reliant, or we are involved with what governments' relationships happen. And we talk about that today. We have a great guest with us, Asha she worked in the OSCham, I'm thinking American as an American, OSCham, Australian Chamber of Commerce in Guangzhou, and she's back in Australia now, right before COVID happened, and we discussed, we're here at the end of 2020. Honestly, the show was recorded almost a couple weeks ago. We live streamed it, but even since then, she's like, things have really heated up even more since we last recorded. I still think there's so much to learn from this. I hope this can help you out. We get some crazy stories about stuff getting left in ports and docks in different parts of the world. Let's tune in. We're starting a new Amazon brand. We have registered a whole new company, US company, and we're using what we promote, Mercury.com. It's a new online banking solution for e-commerce businesses. We made a deal with them. They're supporting the show. If you enjoy the show, check them out. Totally free to apply. They really want to help more e-commerce traders and get business going. We also have a cash bonus for you, and we get a little bit of that too. So it's a win-win. At globalfromasia.com/Mercury, you'll be given a full tutorial of my process I went through. I'll give you some tips in the application process as well. And if you apply through that link, you will get a couple different choices for some cash bonuses. So enjoy that as well. And thank you, Mercury. Thank everybody for tuning into a Global from Asia, live stream, video podcast, audio podcast. We're still adjusting and upgrading with the lockdowns and the lack of in-person events. So we're trying to do these online events, and I'm really excited to bring in today's guest, Asha Forsyth. She is a China-Australia trade and diplomacy specialist with a decade working with and studying in China. Her roles as general manager at the Australian Chamber of Commerce in South China and the foreign affairs manager at Kingle Group. And you've worked with a lot of cross-cultural relations and understandings. You've even worked with Ban Ki-moon and President Xi Jinping, which is really amazing. And you're fluent in Chinese and English with your childhood in Taiwan, and studied languages and political science in University of Sydney and Shanghai's Fudan University. So it's really amazing to have you on today to share about these important relations in today's new world.
Thank you. I plan to do a bit of an intro, but you've outshined me. Your intro of me is pretty spot on. No, that's okay. So just as you mentioned, I've kind of had an early interest in China and Asia relations through growing up in Taiwan, and then kind of furthered that on at university by studying language, Mandarin, and also political science. And from then, I've kind of hopped from workplace to workplace, specializing in basically helping other companies overseas understand China. And one of the main places that I did that was at OSCham, which is the Australian Chamber of Commerce, which is basically just a non-for-profit NGO set up to help people understand and navigate China to do better business. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's a very important role and a very important, association, a community to really bridge these countries. And there's many chambers that do these things. And especially in today's world, literally somebody was just talking about Australia-China relations to me yesterday. And I was like, well, we're going to talk about that today. And, it's difficult, it's difficult times, right? What are some of the common products, I think Australia and China have always had this, at least from my understanding over the years. I think, I'm an American. I don't really understand always these other cultures so well, but maybe just give us an idea of these. What are common trade deals or trade relationships between Australia and China?
Well, I think Australia is kind of unique when it comes to other Western economies or Western trade economies in that it is geographically in Asia, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why China has historically always been a really important trade partner for Australia. And in terms of the common products or services or investments between Australia and China, that was really solidified actually recently in 2015 with the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement. So prior to that, Australia didn't have an agreement like that with China. And obviously being such an important trade partner, there was a lot of background work that led up to that agreement in 2015. And basically what that agreement did was it ensured reduced tariffs, so duty-free for about 85% of Australian goods going into China. And then over the next 4 to 5 years leading up to about, I think it was 95 to 98% of Australian goods. So those, in terms of the actual products, basically, the general pattern is that Australia is known for its high quality ingredients and high quality produce. And with the rising Chinese middle class, they're opting for products like high quality Australian beef, wine, even cosmetics, and kind of healthcare and vitamins. In terms of investments or services, obviously you've got education is a huge one where we've got a lot of Chinese students coming over to Australia for education, and then tourism as well is interlinked with that. So I think that, it's an all-encompassing trade relationship. A lot of it is based on physical products, including also natural resources. China is one of Australia's largest importers of natural resources, and Australia is a very resource-rich country. So we export things like uranium, iron ore, coal, gold, etc. And then outside of that, you've got all the produce as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's really a great overview. I mean, it was kind of leading to the next point is the education. At least for me, of course, Australia, I think of mining. I've yet to go. I've yet to go. I really want to make it to Australia. I have yet to go. There's been a couple close chances, but I haven't been myself. But I mean, I always hear about mining and like you mentioned, natural resources and the education are the top two in my mind from what I've, just in casual conversations and business encounters. So I guess let's just, I don't know. I mean, it's dangerous. I don't get so political, and I don't know how political you want to get. But of course, there's been some testing of these relationships, in this pandemic. I don't know, what's your experience you've noticed the past year or so. Like you just relocated to Sydney just before the pandemic, just by chance, right? It was nothing connected to knowing it. And, what would you say is the evolution of these relationship maybe in this post-COVID world, or this new world?
Well, I think that with the current tensions, it's important to kind of look at the background of how they've evolved. And my understanding, kind of like a brief high-level blow-by-blow of how basically Australia and China's relationship has kind of degraded a little bit over the last year. It's largely been because of COVID. So I'll just run through a brief overview of kind of what happened in terms of the relation from my perspective, and then I can share a bit of insight of where I think it's going, how that's affected business on both sides. So with the relationship, basically, from my understanding, is it all started off with an Australian Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, who on an Australian show basically indicated that there needed to be an independent inquiry into China's handling of COVID that was independent of the World Health Organization, basically saying that Australia would be happy to spearhead that independent inquiry, and that China needed to be transparent. And I think from my perspective, a bunch of other Australian politicians, including the Trade Minister and the Prime Minister, kind of jumped on board being like, yes, we need to have this independent inquiry. And it wasn't very nuanced. It was kind of perceived as quite aggressive and led to the Chinese ambassador to Australia basically saying, if this is the way it's going to be, Chinese consumers might boycott Australian goods. And this, I think, wasn't perceived as real. It was just seen as maybe a bluff. And then all of a sudden, 80% tariffs were whacked on Australian barley. And all of a sudden there was a bunch of Australian farmers going, wait a second, this is real now. This wasn't just a little spat that had no consequences. Now a lot of Australian farmers, are at the mercy of these tariffs. And also about 4 abattoirs, so big Australian meat producers, were blacklisted. And this all happened under the pretense of an inquiry into anti-dumping. But basically it was perceived by Australia as a retaliation. Yeah. So how has that affected Australian businesses? Well, like the initial sectors that have come under fire are obviously in barley, beef, cotton, a lot of agricultural exports, and as well as wine. But in the industries that we talked about a bit before that aren't physical exports like tourism and education, there has been comments by Chinese ministers basically saying that they discourage Chinese tourists and students to go to Australia for fear of racist harassment and attacks, because there were instances in Australia where Chinese people wearing masks were physically and verbally abused on the onset of COVID, which is terrible. But that was kind of used as a justification to discourage Chinese people from going to Australia for tourist or education purposes. So a lot of sectors have been affected by these tensions. And, different parties have weighed in on kind of what should happen next. And a large consensus, which I tend to agree with, my opinion, is that I think that the rhetoric was a little aggressive. Anybody who's dealt with China just on a day-to-day level in business or learnt about Chinese culture and Chinese business culture knows that there's, a lot of culture around saving face and how you do things in the public, but how you do things in the private. And I think that, these things don't disappear when you're moving from the individual level to a political level. It's clear that these cultural tendencies still exist. And I think it's important for politicians in Australia and elsewhere in the world to kind of acknowledge that and work with that. So I would suggest my kind of view for where things could be heading, hopefully, is that the rhetoric of like spearheading an independent inquiry into China in a very aggressive way is kind of changed so that it's more nuanced and is more about collaborating. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, while we are talking, of course, about China and Australia, I think the rest of the world can learn, trying to be politically correct, but you just got to be sensitive, right? I think China is, like you said, it's about the face. You don't want to be too direct. You don't want to be public. Like, I'm just kind of almost rephrasing what you just said. But a lot of these other governments, of course, we had with the Trump administration is very direct and, blunt, which doesn't work in China business. Anybody that's even read a China business book, I think that's kind of like one of the first chapters is face and kind of this whole indirectness of communication. And and a lot of the Western or the foreign non-Asian, I don't want to say Asian, but a lot of the other governments and people are more direct, right? I have Australian friends and they are usually a very more direct kind of people, right? They just tell you how they feel. That's just a Western kind of mindset is I don't want to cover it up. I don't want to like sugarcoat it. I just directly tell you I have a problem and I tell you this is what I think, we should do, but it doesn't, as you have many experience in China. I've been here too, so we know you kind of can't. You got to be a little bit. What would you say, like delicate almost, or strategic about how you deliver your
I would say
opinion.
strategic, and definitely I'm not advocating for, individuals or politicians or governments to not say anything about things that they disagree with. Obviously, there are a lot of ideological differences between Australia and China, for example, in the realm of human rights. With the stuff that's happening in Hong Kong, the militarization of the South China Sea, as well as what's happening with the Uyghur minorities in Xinjiang. Those are all issues that I guess Western democracies are allowed to take issue with. Those are not things that I'm advocating that Western democracies like Australia just have to kind of sit there and go, oh, we just won't say anything because we want a good trade relationship with China. But that being said, I think that, there needs to be an acknowledgement that things need to be brought up in particular ways that are sensitive. And I think likewise on the Chinese side, there shouldn't be an expectation that everybody's going to just go, yes, everything you're doing, we completely agree with. There should be a kind of understanding or a balance that, governments with different ideological standpoints are going to have disagreements about certain issues, and that's okay. But I think that the way that the trade tensions between Australia and China came about was a bit of I guess, it wasn't handled very well in terms of like how it was projected and the perceived aggression. So I think that those views could have been made, but a bit more nuanced, and maybe we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now.
Yeah, I would agree. I do want to bring up a point. I don't know if you would how you feel about it, but I almost feel like this whole lockdown is, like we're doing this interview on online. Everything is going online, which of course is nice, to see each other. But I'm sure that the communication between these governments are not as smooth either. They probably used to do more face to face. Obviously, I have a feeling that might also be affecting, all these global relationships. They're not able to drink tea, or have, a meal or a casual sit down. Or I think even governments are having these issues of communicating online or not having as much face to face. So I think that probably brings more challenges to the way communication happens. I don't know how you.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree. I think that, with a lot of things moving online and face-to-face interaction obviously decreasing a lot in the past year, you can have events like this where you can get to know each other, you can discuss a topic. But there is something to be said about the, I guess, genuine connection that you can get through face-to-face interactions. You can read body language more. There are a lot of small parts of kind of relationships that can be built face-to-face. And I think in the absence of that, there's only so much that you can do. And so with regards to the tensions between Australia and China, like kind of at their peak, the trade minister was picking up the phone, trying to call China, his China counterparts, and they just simply weren't answering the phone. And so I think that, in this day and age where we are relying so heavily on non-face-to-face contact, there is a larger barrier to those very kind of balanced political relations that need to be had. And I think it does put a lot of tension on that.
Yeah. I mean, just to put some, more easy perspective for others. But obviously, it's a relationship, just like a romantic relationship or a business relationship. If you don't meet your business partner, your spouse, your significant other, obviously, even when I talk to my team online, and they misunderstand what I said, at least I feel like they might misunderstand the words that I'm typing, because words, it's not just words, it's verbal. It's even video is, it's not the same as actually that physical feeling of being across the table or with somebody else. So like you said, they don't answer the phone, then you get upset, then you think maybe they were just really not available, but then you're like, oh, are they mad at me? Did I didn't, and all those misunderstandings happen, and then it's probably also, I have a feeling also affecting these government relations for sure, as well as
Yeah,
these
definitely.
personal relations, business relations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my list here. You did a great job with your overview. I always wonder, I don't know if we can go into some specific examples or deals, that positively or negatively that you might notice in this, and how they're. I mean, you did mention some of these farmers and meat companies. I don't know if we want to talk about some specific examples, or maybe we just remove the names. But I would, just trying to think, what can people do now? I guess nobody still knows. It's almost 2021 now. I guess it seems like it's gonna be a little bit longer lockdown. It keeps extending, but I think travel won't be opening up still.
Yeah.
But I mean,
well, I'm definitely happy to give some examples
yeah,
of, I
please.
won't use company names, but
Sure, I understand.
some of the, I guess, deals or companies that have come under the crossfire of not only the tensions between Australia and China, but also of just COVID in general. So, like with regards to the tensions, something that was, circulating the news when those tariffs were implemented straight away was that we had a lot of Australian companies, specifically in seafood and ag produce. So actually, it was a shipment of lobsters and also a shipment of cherries that were just
Okay.
sitting on the dock and left to die and decay because they had been sent obviously before these laws were put in place, or when law does trickle down in China from Beijing sometimes, and I know this from experience working at the chamber, you wouldn't hear about it until maybe 2 to 3 days later, but that's a long time if you're sending millions of dollars worth of produce across the water. So what happened was you had these Australian producers of lobsters and cherries sent their stuff over. Then obviously the law came into place, which was anti-dumping. And then as a result, their Chinese counterparts who would have previously come to pick up the shipment and distribute it along their supply chain didn't. So these shipments were there rotting on the port, and obviously the suppliers in Australia lost millions of dollars. So that's kind of an example of where businesses have come in the crossfire of the tensions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just showcased, I think, for a lot of businesses that the diplomatic relations have obviously significant consequences for the business community. And so it's led to like lobbyists that are farmers basically saying, Australia and China, can you work it out? Because a lot of businesses are now seeing sending stuff to China as too high risk. They don't want to send their shipment across and then have it be stuck at the port. So a lot of businesses are pulling back until they feel comfortable and confident that there's going to be, I guess, a dissipation of the tension such that Chinese counterparts will be picking up their produce and distributing it along the supply line. So that's kind of some tangible examples of how the trade tensions are affecting Australian businesses.
Yeah, I mean,
apart from that, I would say
cherries
that, oh yeah,
good. No, I'm just trying to
yeah,
imagine.
it's funny because
lobsters and cherries.
I would say it is funny because I think that like if you're not in those tangible industries with tangible products that you're literally packing up, putting it into a container, shipping it off, and somebody else is picking it up and putting it in a store, you tend to forget that there's obviously large quantities of Australian goods moving off the coast and into the sea to be delivered to China. And that, if in this case, these people timed their export wrong because of the tensions, that just that stuff can just be sitting there and it isn't used. It seems like a huge waste to me.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm
Yeah, it's
just thinking about
unfortunate.
those are obviously sound very exotic, expensive, valuable. I'm just seeing these boxes of cherries and lobsters sitting on a port in China right now in my mind. But
yeah, exactly.
It's also, we had the US-China Trade War. I guess it's still continuing, but it's true. It's like all of us were, a lot of the people in the community listeners are these business owners that we're stuck. Like you said, we're the ones that are taking this brunt because some Australian government person says something on TV, and then some Chinese business government guy lost face, and then we're just trying to do business. We're just trying to sell our lobsters and sell our cherries. I don't want to get political. It's just
exactly.
Yeah. So
other examples, just outside of the specific diplomatic tensions, I think other examples of like deals going sour or kind of business not working out between Australia and China, I experienced a lot in the support role. So obviously OzCham, as I mentioned, is set up to support businesses to understand and navigate the Chinese business landscape. And we, for example, we had an Australian cosmetic company contact us and say, we believe we've been scammed because an agent, actually an Australian agent, so it was Australian and an Australian agent had promised to, set up social media in China, organize a lot of marketing events, and had charged an exorbitant amount of money for that, and then hadn't delivered. And I think that kind of just stepping away from the political tension subject and just going to general Australia-China relations, I think something that affects those businesses or that business relationship is a lack of understanding. There's such a high barrier when it comes to China in terms of the culture and the language. And so as a result, you've got a lot of Australian businesses like SMEs, small to medium, that want to enter the China market because the numbers are so promising. Everybody wants to sell to the Chinese market, but they don't have the in-house skills to develop China marketing, even just to do the paperwork to actually be able to operate in China. And so you have these agents that obviously help businesses set themselves up, which is a great service, but there's so many of them, and it's really hard for Australian companies to vet these agents. And so you have horror stories like the one I said where they paid a lot of money for a WeChat account, which you and I would know doesn't cost any money hardly, and it's very, very easy to set up. And obviously there's a huge breakdown in communication in terms of how to do business in China, that a lot of Australian businesses, especially on the small side, are kind of falling for. So I don't work for OzCham anymore, but I do always like to do a plug that like OzCham, they're there to vet those agents. They're there to verify the fact that these are legitimate agents that can help set you up. Because I think it's really easy for people to go, oh, we don't know, let's just go with that guy. And then, they lose millions of dollars down the drain for nothing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, thanks for plugging OzCham. I mean, I'm obviously not supposed to either, but so these groups are very, they're on the ground. They have people there. They're nonprofits. That's their job. Is to help find the right partners for Australia or any country. Any chamber of commerce. That's what their main job is. So people hopefully can use that service or utilize that that help that they're there for. Because it is daunting, right? China business, there's these huge numbers, but then obviously there's this huge gap. It's a huge, huge change that a business has to do.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, Asha. I got a question from one person in the community, Zach Franklin, a regular from Seller.deals. He does amazing things for the community. Obviously, he's more in the Amazon space, so he's, of course, curious about Amazon Australia. I know it might not be your exact niche, but how has that been going? Is that, I'm sure there's lots of probably Chinese sellers on there maybe, or others, foreign sellers. I mean, how does, maybe just as a consumer or, your own ideas. I'm sure everybody's always interested about Amazon here.
Yeah, I can definitely shed some insight on that. As you mentioned, the Australian market here is not so much my expertise. I focus on Australian companies going over to China, but as a person living in Australia, I do use e-commerce platforms like Amazon and eBay, and I would say that something that I've noticed. Funnily enough, I was involved kind of at an arm's length with some people importing PPE, so personal protective equipment, from China into Australia and distributing them via e-commerce platforms. And what I noticed is that the Chinese sellers, this is just my kind of overview, I guess, as a consumer, is that the Chinese resellers obviously can get really low prices from China and then bring the stuff over using drop ship and put it on at a very, very competitive price that I saw on, forums and just chatting to a few people. The Australian kind of counterparts or the Australian market can't really compete. So there's that tension there that's on eBay and I think on Amazon as well. That being said, Amazon isn't as developed in Australia as America, of course, because Amazon's from America. So there's, just through using it, there's actually eBay is more developed here, which is funny because I think that's kind of seen as like a Craigslist runoff over in America. So it's funny how different products kind of like rise to the front in different countries. So what I've noticed with Amazon is like, the products are a little bit more limited compared to eBay, but both platforms are the competitive pricing is coming from Chinese resellers that make the local market find it a little bit difficult to compete.
Got it. Yeah, which is similar globally, I would say, even in the US with Amazon when they opened it up more to international sellers. It got definitely more competitive. I mean, even eBay days, early eBay days, I think it started like 2004, 2005. But thanks for the insight, Asha. So I think we're going to switch to the networking mode with we have a small but good group of people here. Chris Davey is here from FBA for You and Zach. So we'll probably flip off to live in a few minutes, but I do want to, I know maybe you could share what you're up to, how, if people, you, like you said, you specialize more in Australia to import into China. Maybe you could share what you're working on or how people could learn more.
Yeah, I'd love to. So as I mentioned, I was working in Guangzhou as the general manager of the Australian Chamber of Commerce. And in the last year, I've relocated back to Sydney, basically just for a change of scene. I wanted to be closer to my family. But I also wanted to do boots on the ground work in Australia, because that's something that, is equally as important is, educating and facilitating those good relationships here before people go over and, make big business mistakes. So at the moment, when COVID hit, I actually took advantage of the lockdown and I have co-written a book. It's yet to be it's in the process of being published. So
congrats.
Thank you. It's a little bit different. It's basically on Chinese tech, and how it's vastly different from Western tech, but also how international companies can leverage it to access the China market. So I've co-wrote it with my partner, who was head of global marketing for WeChat, the only foreigner in WeChat. And we kind of brought our two expertise together to basically shed light on a topic that a lot of people know is really important, but they don't really know how to navigate it because, as you would know, Michael, China tech is so far ahead, but it's like a different world. It's very, very different. So I've been working on that, which has taken up a lot of my time. And then apart from that, I've been doing kind of private consulting for select clients. So basically just what I was doing at OzCham, but privately and independently for particular clients that reach out through my network. Yeah.
Great.
And if people want to find me,
that's awesome. So
they can.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
How can people find you? Yeah.
I was just going to say, basically, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And with regards to the book and any consulting around that, I'll be announcing the book
Okay.
later on. So watch this space.
So yeah, we'll link up on the show notes to your LinkedIn, and then we'll also. I can't wait for the book. I always love to read people's books about China and China business, even though I'm in here. I love to learn. So we'll try to get that added to the show notes when it's ready, and then people
Awesome.
could grab it. It'll be like on Kindle, or it'll probably be print and in Kindle, or
Yeah, it'll be
things like
print
that.
and
Or
Kindle.
okay. Okay, great. Yes, definitely send it. We'll link it up so people listening later can find it. Thank you so much, Asha. So, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up the recording? I think we
I just
covered a
like to
lot here.
say
So,
we covered a lot.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
think that, for me, it was a really good opportunity to come on here. So thank you for having me. As I mentioned, I have kind of been in isolation writing this book. So it was actually a really good opportunity for me to brush off of my facts, for me to make sure that, I am following this. Because sometimes I think, especially with COVID, it is easy just to kind of get in a hole and just kind of shut out the whole world. So I just want to say thanks
Tell me
for
about it.
inviting me and also giving me the opportunity to make sure I'm keeping abreast on Australia-China relations. And, fingers crossed
Great.
that the diplomats can
Yeah.
work it out and the economies can continue to grow. And hopefully the relationship can build. So it's not just an economic one, it also includes cultural ties and, linguistic language ties as well. So hopefully it'll be a good kind of reminder or a good warning for people in Australia and elsewhere to go, wait a second, we should, I guess, invest more in a deeper relationship with China. So we'll see. But thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure, Asha. So thanks so much. And I guess also just we're all one world, right? I mean, I think it's the global economy. We're all so interconnected now more than ever. So I think hopefully we all got to brush up our relations knowledge with all these countries. So I appreciate you sharing with us. It's been really, really fascinating. And so that's it for recording. But if you're watching this now, Asha and others, just stick around. We'll have a little bit of networking. All right. Thank you again, Asha.
Bye. Thanks.
We're kicking off 2021. We're relaunching our online masterminds. We did those a couple years ago. We made some great relationships in the community, great business and personal relationships with people, and they're one of my favorite parts of the mastermind and the community. We have a whole new mini site, mastermind.gfavip.com. You will see there the different groups. We have, of course, Amazon, we have B2B trading, we have drop shipping, we have more and more. It's becoming more of a platform with leaders in the community hosting these masterminds, trying to make the best of the new year with this new online lockdown and a new online community building. Check it out, mastermind.gfavip.com. Thanks in advance. Thank you so much, Asha, for sharing. Definitely, I'm excited about her book coming out. We'll try to update the show notes with her book, and it's very important, to help support people when they launch their books. I know how much work it goes into creating them and also promoting them, and I'm really excited to read them myself. I try my best to keep up with all my friends and in the industry here creating books as well, and it's contributing to the ecosystem. But wow, I'm thinking of like cherries and lobsters sitting on ports in China. We can't, as business owners, we like to think we have control. That is why a lot of us has become entrepreneurs. We, kind of quit our jobs because we feel like we want to have control over our destiny, control over what we can do. But fortunately, if you're a cherry farmer in Australia, you might be getting hit pretty hard right now, and it most likely has nothing to do with the way you're operating your business. And that's why, I've even said it a long time ago to people, diversification in your business, selling physical goods, but also building communities, building content. I've been sharing that on other podcasts. So, try to have multiple streams of income. Of course, we have to have our main income, which is selling product for these cherry farmers. But there's always ways to adapt as best you can, although sometimes you might get crushed. You might have to change your business. But I do hope people bounce back. I do hope people stay positive. It's been a heck of a year for all of us. See, I thought 2019 was crazy with the trade war, And 2020 has been obviously COVID and trade relations, but stay positive, keep on trying. I'm losing my voice here. I'm freezing cold here in Shenyang, China, but try my best to stay warm, stay positive, and keep on pushing forward. Thank you so much for everything, everybody. And keep on listening, keep on watching, keep on making action. I wish you the best in 2021.
To get more info about running an international business, please visit our website at www.globalfromasia.com. That's www.globalfromasia.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to our iTunes feed. Thanks for tuning in.